Dr. Glenn,
Yes.
today's topic, what are core values and why do they matter?
So core values are the why behind everything that we do. It also affects like all the life choices that we make. And then once you know your core values, you can kind of assess what's working in your life and not working in your life based on those core values. And then it also helps to establish and define really healthy relationships in your life.
Awesome.
So it's hugely important.
So we're done.
Pretty much done. This episode's over.
We're going to dive into all of this in this episode. We want you guys to walk away really understanding what are core values, how they impact your life, and they impact your life in every possible way. So before we jump in, let me introduce the podcast. Welcome to 12-Week Relationships. This is your place for better relationships in weeks, not years. My name is Pye.
I'm Dr. Glenn.
So when we say relationships, we mean all relationships, starting with the one that you have with yourself, working out to your friends, your family, your romances, marriages, business partnerships, all of them. And this episode is a bit different from just our normal podcast episodes. What we want to do is give a bit of an introduction. So over the next 5 episodes, or 5 or so, we're going to give an introduction into exactly what it is that we do. What is core value focused therapy? How does it differ from counseling and coaching and other therapy models? And we're going to begin with core values because this is kind of the root of our model. And so those that are considering our coaching program, we want you guys to actually have a series of videos to get an idea of what it is that you're jumping into before actually beginning the coaching process. Okay, so with all that said, core values. So why don't we start first with the topic of what? You said that they are the why behind everything you do. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So for example, like if you ask someone like, what is their core value? They may say spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
But spirituality in and of itself isn't the core value. It's the why behind the spirituality.
Mm.
So if you ask people like, why are you spiritual? Someone may say like, I want to serve God. And if they really mean that, that would be their why, being of service, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another person may say, I like to socialize.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's about connections, right? Or another person may say, I love, doing community service on the community and being of service that way. That would be their why. So once you get to, it's more of an emotional reason of why they do things. And once you get to that place, you can be really clear about what this person wants.
There's several interesting things in what you just said. I mean, the first thing is, well, we're going to get into that in the next episode. We're going to talk about how your core values might not be what you think they are, right? Because what you're essentially saying is that, and this is what we found from our research, is that somebody might believe that they are hardworking. This is a core value. That they are spiritual, like you said, that this is a core value. That I believe in strength. I believe it's important to be authentic. We think that those are the actual core values when in reality, the core value is the underlying why for that thing.
Exactly. Like it's getting to the root. Like our whole approach is not a superficial answer, but getting to the core of why you do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get there, then everything becomes really clear. Like it's not so complicated anymore.
But going back to that first one that you mentioned, like spirituality, some of the things that you said, I know personally would be difficult for people to be honest about. Like you're absolutely right, first of all, that you can go to church or be religious or believe in God or any of those things. You can do them for a number of different reasons. It could be, your family's tradition. Growing up, this is what you know. It could be that you want to respect your parents and their wishes. It could be that this is your social sphere. This is where you meet people and how you get to know people, and it's your support system. It could be that you genuinely just want to learn and grow personally, or that you want to develop a relationship with God. Every one of those are different underlying core values, and they're all valid.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a judgment thing, but it's breaking the facade, because if you take everything at face value, like if you go to a spiritual center, the assumption is that everyone has the same core value in this belief. But once you get to the core of each individual, you can actually figure out why they're actually there.
That takes a lot of honesty, though, like a person being honest with themselves to admit that.
It takes a lot of self-awareness, right? It's about your character versus the reputation and how you're being perceived.
Yeah.
And that's the distinction. You have to go deeper than how you want to be seen by other people.
Yeah.
And once you do that, then you can know your core values.
So a person, from our research, a person might have 3 to 5 of these core values that are basically driving every one of their decisions. And if we were to carry this one out a little bit, let's just say that a person's reason for being spiritual is because, let's say, they value the community, that they value the support system and the friends that they have there. This is a very common kind of underlying value for going to church and for spirituality. Then it's going to dictate how they behave once they're in that environment, right?
Exactly. It's because it'll be more about the engagements and building relationships than it is about the spirituality itself.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not, there's no judgment, but once you know that, then you're not going to be confused. You're like, oh, this is really what's driving me is connections and building relationships.
Yeah. Well, and that's the big part of it is first being honest enough with yourself to figure out, to acknowledge why it is that you do something. Then the second piece is understanding how that's going to affect our behavior. Because if it is community and relationships that you value, then at church, I wouldn't be expecting this person to be sitting in the corner, let's say, reading their scriptures. I would expect them to be sitting with other people and mingling and chatting. And maybe it's still a spiritual experience, but it's one that is involving other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Like any type of spiritual community, you have like a small group that really believe in that, that particular belief. And then that's their core value. They're trying to live that out. And then I feel like the rest is more about ulterior motives, socializing, maybe trying to find a date.
But that almost sounds negative. And I think that's the tough part.
But it's not. Like, it's not being negative. It's just being honest.
It is.
Right? Like, the whole purpose of any spiritual center is to be honest and self-aware.
Yeah.
So if you know why you're there, at least you're honest. Like, that's the whole purpose, at least, that you have to come honest.
So maybe this one can almost sound negative in a way because of the topic, right? We're talking about spirituality. So let's disconnect it from that. Let's maybe take it toward something else. And it's not to say that this is, I love the example that you gave, but it's to say that what if we were to apply this to, let's say, your university education? What are some of the different underlying values that might drive you to get an education?
So some of when I look at some of the students, some of them are to get a job. Like, ultimately, it's just to get employment.
So it's to provide a living.
To provide a living. Other people, it's their passion. Like, it was their dream to, work in the field of mental health. Other people is like family. Usually like their family, they'd be the first in their family to do it. So there's like a goal to achieve. Mm-hmm. So those are values that are common.
Okay. You are a working professor at Whittier College. So I'm going to ask this. The person that is truly passionate about psychology versus the person that wants a job in psychology versus the other person that is maybe doing it for their family, right? Because their family encouraged them to go to college. What is the difference in their behavior when they're in class?
So the person that's really driven, this is how it usually goes. Like, in a classroom setting, you have like a very small percentage, like, they have a big ambition. So it's not about just passing the class or doing the assignments. They have a big vision about where they want to be in the future. They want to go to graduate school. They want to, they see themselves accomplishing, working in a private practice setting. Like, they already have this grand vision because that's their passion and what they want to do. So you can see the dedication and work, and they go above and beyond doing assignments. Right, because their value is that is their value.
You don't have to ask them to do something; they're just going to go and do it.
They're just self-motivated and driven, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have the others who are they're just there to pass the class, and then they don't know what they want to do, but they just want to socialize more. They're focusing on friendships more, and they're just doing the minimum to pass.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, there'd be a varying degree, right? Like the people that want to become psychologists, but this isn't necessarily. Maybe they want to do this because it's a way of providing a living, right? They like it. They want to provide a living. They probably are the B and C students. Then you have the people that are doing it. They're in college because their parents, they just chose psychology as a major, and they're probably barely getting by.
And those are the people where their core values is comfort. Mm-hmm. They don't want to leave their comfort zone. And ultimately, they want to receive as much as they can, but they're not going to stretch themselves or do anything. They're just going to stay in their emotional box.
Yeah.
And they're always turning in assignments late, or they're trying to make up all these excuses. And it's the same, like no matter how many classes they take, they do the same thing in every class.
Yeah. So going back to that core value. So for the student that we are kind of giving examples of, the first student, we would say that their underlying core value is a need to, well, they need to learn psychology, but for what reason? We might find out that, okay, they have personally experienced trauma in their lives and they want to be able to understand it and help other people through that. It might be a value that's toward, I just want to help others improve in their lives. I want to make the world a better place before I go. It could be a number of these things that drive that passion, but that's the actual underlying core value.
Correct. It's the personal development, it's the growth, it's the being of service. All of that comes out. Their core values are very clear.
Yeah. And on the other side, like when it comes to, let's say that they're in college because of their parents, really the core value there is a respect of their parents. It's a submissive, respectful approach to, it is filial piety.
Yeah, I'm just doing it because I'm told to do this.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's respect to my family. So there's no individual motivation to actually be in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those same core values then would extend outside of just them being at the university, because it's very likely that if a person is driven by this respect toward their parents and being submissive and listening and following, that they're going to be the type of person that is also going to be what we might call like a mama's boy or, daddy's girl, the person that's always kind of attached to their parents and just lets them sort of overly be involved in their lives.
Or even just entitled students that just give me without actually working for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, this passion to, let's say, for example, it's this drive to understand human psychology and to help others to get past difficult things that they had experienced in their own lives. If that's the underlying motivation, it's going to affect them not only in the way that they study, but in the way that they work, in the way that they pursue outside interests, everything around them.
Yeah, it's going to affect every choice that you make in your whole life.
Yeah.
And then, going back to the other students, the ones that are just trying to get by, it's a hard pill to swallow, but if the student accepts that their core value is comfort and their value is that they're not willing to stretch themselves and do what's required to get what they want, even though they like it in their mind, once they accept that, then they can change it, right? They can identify like, wow, this core value is not serving me because I'm not getting what I want because I'm just trying to be comfortable. And this is why I'm not achieving.
Yeah.
And, to do that, it takes a lot of self-awareness, honesty, and insight to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, again, going back to the first example you gave was the example of spirituality, right? So now if we can see on the university side that this applies to each student that's there. It applies to each person that's at church. So now we can go back and study that a little bit more, because if it affects everything outside of that thing, our core value, that underlying why, affects your behavior in any situation. It could be career, it could be friendships, it could be romance, it could be, spirituality, all of this. Well, let's say the person we gave the example of a person that goes to church because they value the community and social aspects of it. That is what they value. Well, that's going to manifest itself in other ways outside of that area. Like that would be the same person that would very much like to hold and host dinner parties.
Absolutely. Host events at their work, happy hours after work. They would be setting all of these things up.
They might be a wedding planner or an event coordinator, or they can find a way to turn that value into anything that they do professionally or personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even in intimate relationships, socializing and being out would be a value that they would want to share with their partner. Mm-hmm. So it extends to everything.
And if that person ends up with somebody who is, let's say, values their independence and their solitude, right? Then you start having issues.
That's going to cause conflict because their values don't match.
Correct.
I want to go out and be with people and I want you with me versus I need some downtime and I need more intimacy and I need to just kind of be alone with you.
Yeah.
That's going to be a huge source of conflict.
So this is where we get into understanding that, okay, a person's underlying core values, there's not that many of them. There's 3 to 5 of these main core values that drive each of us, and they affect us in every arena of our lives. And this is where I want to point out is the primary difference between the way that we operate in terms of core value focused therapy is exactly that. It's core value focused therapizing. So basically, we're going to take you through a therapy process that's rooted around your core values. And this is the difference between our services versus, let's say, counseling or, a typical psychotherapy, that you might receive, or just marital counseling or any of those things. Maybe you can go into that a little bit, because from your experience, isn't this the exact reason? I don't want to lead. I feel like I'm leading you down this question, but this is exactly why counseling and other types of therapy are not effective, because we're giving advice, we're coaching, we're guiding before really understanding someone's underlying value system.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, oftentimes it can be a very superficial type thing. Like, change your thought, right? Like, oh, I feel tired. I feel energized. That may work temporarily, but all of those thoughts are coming from a root belief that you have, and it's getting to that root belief. So, like, going back to the student example, if a person is like, they're not trying, they just want to be comfortable, and they're not going to do what's required to be successful. And then I can go over their assignment and be like, hey, you need to improve this and this and this. But they're going to continue to do that throughout all of their assignments, right? We would have to keep doing this week after week, versus having the discussion like, look, you're not doing your best.
Yeah.
You're not giving your best, and you know it. What is it going to take for you to do better? Because you're just valuing comfort and getting by. And I've had these conversations with students, and once we get to the core of it, they actually start doing better. Like, it's less micromanaging about, this assignment. It becomes more about like, what are you going to do about this at the core? And that's what this is. This is getting to the core root of who you are as a person and why you're doing what you're doing. There's no place to hide.
Yeah. And typical from, you have 20 years of experience in psychotherapy and social work and everything that you've done. But just from my practical experience, as well as from my research, that's not the way counseling works. Counseling and therapy and coaching, the way that it typically works is symptomatic. So you come in and you say, this is my issue. And they do exactly what you said with the student. They would say, okay, well, you need to study harder. You need to go and do this. This is what you should be doing at nighttime. This is this. Instead of addressing the underlying belief system and saying, okay, are you studying the right major? Are you at the right place? Should you be in college? If you believe that you should, then this is the underlying value set, the beliefs that are making you behave in a certain way. That's not being done for individuals and for couples. So what we end up with is this surface level guidance. When a couple comes in, they say that we're fighting. The counselor is going to say, well, let's talk about how. Show me an example. And they're going to sit there and change words. Well, instead of saying this is what you should say. Instead of this, try this. And the reality is that these two people have fundamentally different values.
No, I mean, and that's the thing. That's a medical model approach, right? Symptom management, stay in your box, not too much, not too little. And as long as you do that, you'll be okay. So, whether couples therapy or individuals, this was kind of the breaking point for me where, like, man, I started to kind of veer off from traditional counseling. Was when I was working with a psychiatrist. He's really brilliant in terms of like diagnosing, and he follows the medical model to the T. So there was this one person we were working with, and he was an accountant, and he was like, I became an accountant because my father was an accountant. It's a safe job, and within the culture, like, you have to do what's safe. But he really wanted to become a psychologist. And then so we had this chat, and I was like, I think you should pursue it. Like, why don't you go to, talk to some academic counselors and see what's going on? And then eventually I referred him to, he went to the psychiatrist, and then the psychiatrist goes, yeah, you can't do that. Don't do that, because if you actually pursue psychology and get disappointed, you're going to get more depressed. So just take these pills, stay as an accountant, increase your exercise, wow, right? Increase your exercise, start dating more, and just stay in this box. And that was kind of the distinction for me, where I was like, yeah, there has to be more than just this maintenance symptom management model. And that was kind of the breaking point for me.
Yeah.
And it was like, I left, and it was like, hey man, you need to pursue that, because that's your value. If value, being of service and making a difference, if that's what's driving you, and you're kind of having this superficial existence because you're not honoring that, you need to go for it.
When you say this, I kind of have these deep, I'm going to call them stomach feels.
Just gotta use the bathroom, man.
That's not it.
The coffee's kicking it.
No, it's just I've seen and heard so many of these examples, and that's the crazy part is that psychotherapy from an individual one-on-one level can generally be pretty effective, and the good ones I find that a good psychotherapist, well, a lot of them can really properly diagnose. They do a great job of understanding what it is that's going on. Where it fails is in the prescribing of the solution, because I think too often, whether we're talking about marital counseling, whether we're talking about like individual, psychotherapy work, too often a lot of personal advice and fears and thoughts get mixed into the message, like in this example. Whereas understanding that person's values, like if that person has an underlying value that is to help other people, to be of service, right? It's going to be clearly visible in the other things that they do. With this accountant, for example, in their free time, let's say that he or she is volunteering at church to go and help other people. They're going and volunteering at the soup kitchens. They're going and finding opportunities to help the people around them, to bring cookies to neighbors. This is a part of their life because they value helping others. You put that person and tell them to go and continue with accounting, you might as well hand them a gun and tell them to shoot themselves, because
exactly.
They're going to be miserable doing that, because that is completely not in alignment. And so had the person actually spent the time to understand their values, they could say, look, you're in a career that does not align with
your values,
who you are.
Yeah. And this is the crazy thing, because it was like, what do you do on your free time? I read self-help books. I read psychology books. I bought a DSM. I bought a DSM because I was just, that manual that teaches you how to die. That's not an easy read, right?
Yeah.
So everything about this guy was like, yeah, this is what you should do. But that was the split, So like, if you want to talk about it's more of a blanket statement, but you want to talk about medical model, the core value of a medical model is maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
That is the core value versus change.
So fascinating.
Core value focused therapy, and what we offer is basically saying there's an individual accountability, and you honor what it is that's driving you in your life, no judgment, and we're going to help you to shape your life through those values, period.
Yeah.
It's not a subscription service to keep coming back. Let's get to the core, let's get to the roots, and let's get to work.
Yeah. Okay. So we've kind of gone into how these core values can affect every area of our lives, from our careers to, relationships to just our quality of life, everything. That's one that I do want to talk a little bit more about, though, specifically on quality of life and how core values impact that. And we kind of just gave an example of it, right? The accountant who went to this psychotherapist and was told to stay as an accountant without
and take your meds.
Yeah, without understanding his or her values. Well, that advice is going to completely destroy their quality of life.
Well, going back to this person, they were an accountant for 10 years, and then they were taking antidepressants for 10 years.
Jeez.
Right? Because he was like, the diagnosis was like, dude, you got depression, tone it down, you got a safe job, everything is okay, make more friends. So he was staying in this box, but he was still on meds. Versus, I was like, bro, after I left, like, you need to go see somebody else. And so I referred him somewhere else. And then the other person that he was working with was like, no, you got to pursue it. And then so a couple years later, pursued it off of the medications.
Yeah.
He's off of the antidepressants. He's doing what he loves. He's building friendships. So once he pursued career, he actually started having more friends that had similar interests because they're all in that field. And his life became better.
Mm-hmm.
He was happier.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, so in my not so humble opinion, I don't even know how the phrase goes. Anybody who says that, in my humble opinion, they should just add, in my not so humble opinion. If you say that phrase, it's a not so humble opinion. But look,
in your not so humble opinion,
venting aside, I wrote this book, this framework on how a healthy relationship should operate from the standpoint of core values. And this was the beginning of how we started working together. So if you're listening to the podcast for the very first time, you can actually go back and kind of listen to our story and how we ended up where we're at now. But the entire framework for a healthy relationship was built on actually understanding your own core values, the other person understanding their core values, and then creating an alignment between them and understanding when there's a misalignment, these are the things that are going to go on. And this is essentially this formula, and how do you balance that to create a relationship that has desire but is also sustainable.
Yeah.
Was amazing. I always go back to when you first read that. Obviously, you're reading a book by a wedding photographer.
No, it blew my mind. Like literally my head exploded, and then my wife had to piece it back together.
But how was that not part of, I guess I never understood in my research doing this, when I started kind of decoding and I went through 500 case studies to get to this place, right? The first thought in my mind is, someone's had to have thought of this. And I'd already read a lot up to that point. I mean, I spent a decade reading just before even like starting to collect data. So I'm 20 years into reading, and I'm thinking, someone has to have made this, but I haven't seen a single book that talked about this. And then I started looking for more, and I still couldn't find any.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing, like the concept of core values and aligning it and finding someone that matches your values. Like it sounds simple, but it hasn't been done. And it's all, for example, like in individual psychotherapy, the whole concept is like an onion, and you're peeling the layers to get to the core, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once you get to the core of the person, you can figure out who they are. So that concept is there in individual psychotherapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're right, in couples, the assumption is that, okay, if you figure yourself out, then you'll just make good decisions when it comes to couples, versus saying the same thing. As a couple, you're peeling layers, and then you're looking at each other's core values, and then you can figure out what's not working.
Yeah.
And that's the crazy thing. Like in working with clients now, it gets really quiet really quickly. So, people can come in with conflicts. Like you didn't do this, and why didn't you pick up my son, and and they're arguing. And then once we do the core values and we align their core values, and they look at it side by side, and we're like, okay, let's list the fights that you have. And then it comes down to, which value are you fighting for?
Mm-hmm.
It gets quiet. They stop arguing because we get to the root.
Yeah.
Right. So like in that example, one couple wants to feel emotionally safe before being talked to.
One person in the relationship.
Yeah, because the other person starts getting mad. Like, why are you attacking me? And then they start to withdraw because emotional safety was their core value. The other person, they're seeking connection, but then by yelling, they're not connecting, right? So it's not even about picking up the kid. It's in those moments of stress, learning how to connect. And once that was identified, the arguing stopped because we got to the core of the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those that are coming into our coaching process, if we're working individually, it's about essentially, individually or as couples that come in, we do the exact same thing. And the first several sessions is, number one, let's deal with basically anything that is overly traumatic that we need to stop right now. Like any behavior that we call it triage, right? Mm-hmm. This is our early triage to make sure that we don't want our people bleeding out on the table while we're getting into the deeper stuff. And as soon as we get past that, and that might take a week or two, then we start getting into the idea of what are core values. And we'll spend several weeks helping them to understand, decode, and eventually refine those core values into a simple list. This is who I am, at least right now. It can change, but this is who I am right now.
Yeah, and you get a clarity about why you're doing what you're doing and who you are and what drives you. So as a couple, it's aligning the values and identifying what's working and what's not working, and seeing that through over 12 weeks. On a personal, individual level, it's after that period of knowing your core values and knowing the trauma issues that you have, it's assessing your life and looking at the totality of it and using the rest of the time to piece together and start building a life that suits your values.
Yeah. So we're usually getting there within 6 to 7 weeks. We're getting to that refined list of values. And then beyond that point, it's helping them to understand the framework for a healthy relationship, a healthy life, and how those values play into it. And by the end, you essentially have this, you become the expert of your own life and of your own relationships.
Yeah, you don't have to keep coming back for more and more advice. All of the answers are provided in 12 weeks. It doesn't mean we've solved it all, but it means that you have the answers and you know what to do moving forward.
Yeah. So maybe we can give an example of that now, just to kind of close this out, is once you understand your core values, why don't we go through the different types of relationships that you might have and talk about how knowing those values would affect your friendships, your family relationships, your business relationships, your partnership, intimate marriages, everything.
Yeah. So for example, going back to the accountant who became a psychologist, all of his friends had the similar values of safety and then just kind of maintaining. So once he started pursuing his passion of psychology, what do you think happened with his friendships, those friendships?
You would probably naturally start distancing yourself.
They started to fall off and he started having new friends.
Yeah.
And then when it came to safety versus pursuing your passions, then his life started, like even exercise, he started pursuing things that he really enjoyed, like martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then it opened up the floodgates for every area of his life reflected passion.
Are you talking about me right now?
I am.
An accountant that turned into a psychologist?
No, that's so funny, huh? It's so funny. It is you, Pye.
I was an accountant.
It is you, Pye.
I took there was an in-between.
Yeah.
I became an accountant, photographer, educator, psychologist.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it is you, though. It's your brother, okay? It's your brother. Your long-lost brother. I'm going to
very familiar.
reunite you. No, but it's crazy. Like he was off of meds, 10 years on medications.
Yeah.
And then he stopped.
That's insane.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me how, so when you do understand these values, not only do you naturally, I mean, I find that when our clients and the people that we've coached come through the program, when they actually gain I want to say a tangible understanding of their values, meaning like a person that hasn't gone through a formalized program might have an idea. If they do the personal work, they might get to a place where they have an idea of who they are. But when they finish this program, they have this tangible like list of this is who I am and what I am. They are able to perfectly explain why I'm no longer friends with this person. Why doesn't this interest me anymore? Why is this family relationship so difficult? This is why I'm so close to so-and-so. This is why this grinds against me and I just don't like it. Because they can go, okay, that was either in alignment or outside of alignment with my values. And now I know.
Yeah, and it makes things a lot more simpler. So like the racing thoughts about what do I do here? How do I respond? All of that goes away and it's just like, oh, this is not aligned with who I am. It becomes that simple.
Yeah. And for the person that, another fascinating side of it is for the person that goes through the process, when it comes to, let's put them in a situation like a bar or maybe at a cocktail party, right? I'll hear these stories where they can, within seconds, identify if this is someone that they want to pursue a friendship or a romance with, because they know themselves. They know, okay, I am driven by personal growth, being outside of my comfort zone. I'm driven by these things. These are the things that this is who I am. I want to help others. They meet the person at the bar that owns a car dealership. I make this much money. And that's all they talk about. And they're like, man, it's cool that you're successful in business, but who you are and why you're successful and all those things it's for the money, and that doesn't tie to who I am. And they can make these judgment calls within seconds that are accurate. And they go, I'm not going to spend time here. I'm not going to spend my energy on this person. I am going to spend time here. This is a friend who I think has the same values that I do.
And, in that example, core value, once you know your core values, it brings extreme confidence.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of like in that example with the car dealership person at the bar, instead of like, oh, I got to impress this person, it becomes, oh, we just don't match, man.
Yeah.
On to the next one.
Yeah.
And it just becomes a lot easier to build relationships because it's much more clear.
Yeah. Taking it into, let's say, a marriage. Why don't we give an example first of like misaligned values? I think you did a little bit earlier, right?
Yeah. So, this is a common theme, but like you'll have one partner who will have like self-growth, serving the community, and then like, leaving a legacy. And then on the right-hand side, you'll have the other partner that says family, friends, safety, enjoyment, right? And then they're like, they can't even get along together when they're trying to do hobbies together, because the person on the left, when they're doing a hobby, it's got to be purposeful and it's about growth. The other person, enjoyment, is just relaxing and doing nothing. So even when they're trying to have time together just to have fun, they're not having fun because their core values do not match.
Yeah. Which means this is again where we get back to symptomatic advice. Symptomatic advice would be like, you need to go on more dates.
Talk more.
Yeah, talk more. You need to get into the emotional stuff and have deeper conversations.
Use I statements and be more present.
Yeah.
put yourself in the other person's shoes.
And all of that symptomatic based advice would be things that would actually send the relationship toward failure quicker.
Because they're going to feel like we were not accomplishing what they've set out for us to do.
Because with those misaligned values, the more time they spend doing those things, the more it's just going to be in their faces.
Yeah. And then going back to that example, once the person knows like, oh my gosh, you're right. I love growth and I have to be active. That's pleasurable to me. And then once the other partner understood that, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, you just want to tune out and do nothing. Just watch Netflix or just chill or whatever. That's cool. And then there was an understanding versus trying to force each other to do what the other person wanted.
Yeah.
There was an understanding that took place, and then they're able to honor it.
And going back to, okay, so from our process, our goal is to, once we've identified and refined those values, we create what we call a core value roadmap. So this is where both people essentially have to come into the center and adopt the values that they are missing from the other person. And if they can't wholeheartedly adopt it, at least get to a point where they can respect it.
Yeah, and what's cool about this process is once we look at their responsibilities, like the individual responsibilities and the shared responsibilities in the relationship, you can start looking at how to refine the core values because you're looking at, they're kind of unconsciously doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. So it starts to come out. So even if you don't have shared core values, you can start building them and start learning how to, what is actually there that's making the relationship work.
Yeah. And eventually, so when you have a couple that has gone through the process, or maybe they're lucky enough to start with shared core values, this frankly does not happen often, just statistically does not happen often. But once you get to that place, then the relationship dynamic changes dramatically. We're talking like conflicts no longer even seem like conflict. I mean, you're faced with conflict and challenges every single day. Who's going to take the kids to this? Who's going to do this? I'm going to go and handle this area. Then, okay, the basement just flooded. We got to handle this. All these different moments during the day where there's opportunities to resolve a problem, conflict. In most instances, they just kind of resolve themselves naturally. When two people align in their values, they can understand one another, understand each other's intentions, and actually, even if words that were hurtful were said, they can look past the words to be able to understand what the other person is thinking and feeling.
Yeah, so it's not this superficial, you're attacking me. It's, you're defending your value.
Yeah.
I understand. And that's what conflict comes down to, is understanding. And, just being understood about what it is that you want.
And going over to like relatability, the couple feels closer, more connected, like they actually understand each other better. It improves intimacy. It improves the reward of the relationship, every aspect. So we have this framework, one side of that framework being desire, one side of it being sustainability, with 5 components in each. Every side is boosted. It's improved.
And that's what I love about the model, is that basically instead of giving superficial advice, like go back to when you first dated and then have that rekindle that romance. It's building the key components to sustain a long-term relationship. And by doing so, the desire and the quality time that you want to spend together will come back.
Yeah.
That is the distinction, because it's at the roots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So I think we spend a good amount of time on understanding what our core values, why do they matter? These are the things that drive our every action, our belief systems, our intentions, everything. In addition, they matter because they affect every relationship that we touch, Absolutely. Everything around us. Next, we're going to go into, your core values might not be what you think they are. We touched on that a little bit here, but we're going to give you some exercises. Those that are listening or watching, we'll give you some exercise on how you can actually get to these core values. But we're done for this episode. If you all enjoyed, we'd obviously love for you to subscribe to the podcast. We also have a newsletter that we're going to be launching shortly, which you can subscribe to at 12weekrelationships.com. And it's there on the website where you can also join the waitlist for coaching. Right now we have one-on-one coaching available with Dr. Glenn, but in the future we will also have online group coaching. So it'll be a 12-week similar service where we'll have kind of weekly modules as well as a weekly group meetup online, of course. So we'll have that coming soon. But that's it for now. Do you got anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for the next episode. Oh, And if you'd like, you can drop onto the iTunes store, leave us a review on the podcast if it's a good one. If not,
just DM
us.
Yes.
DM us, tell us what you think, or just ask questions. We love bringing your questions onto the podcast. And we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.